So very good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, the organizers of the CGS, to provide me with the opportunity to give a small, to share my thoughts rather, with usually an unusual topic that is being discussed over the last 50 years of our independence. But this has become very important and essential today, because there is a saying that writing history of a nation starts after minimum after 50 years of its existence. The only small message that I want to give you here is that writing history, studying history, or even reading history is not a politically innocent issue. Writing, reading, and studying history is very much political. For example, Bangladesh, the Liberation War of Bangladesh, the greatest event for the people of Bangladesh, also remains a very unique event in South Asia and to a large extent to the whole world, because between 1945, the Second World War, and 1990s, when balkanization of East Europe took place, there is not a single example that any people of anywhere created a state out of a post-colonial, neo-colonial state like Pakistan. South Asia remains unique because it's the only one country that has wrestled out its independence through a liberation war. It was not negotiated across the table as it happened for other South Asian countries. So we the people, particularly for our previous generation who fought the liberation war with a lot of sacrifices, have enormous reasons to be proud of, that we really created history. Now, Bangladesh Liberation War was a national liberation war in the first place, but it eventually became a regional war and finally a global war. And many forces, including two superpowers of the day, took sides according to their own realpolitik. Now, how we look at history written in at least two countries that were directly involved in our national liberation war: Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. In even Dhaka, at least 7,000 to 8,000 books have already been available. If anyone wants to see them, you can see them. Of those, perhaps I have tried to read a few hundred. And there is a pattern that I want to share with you all, because this is, in my humble view, is very important, as I said earlier, how you look into history and how history writing influences contribute to shaping the future of a country. So if we talk about the first three mega narratives written by the official intelligentsia, the ruling class intelligentsia for the matter, in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, we'll see three patterns. When our historians write history, we start from at least 1947. From 1947 to 1970, we have a history of mainstream history writing I'm talking about. There was a series, the Bangladesh Liberation War culminated in, was a result of a series of people's struggle for rights, political rights, cultural rights, economic rights, equality, this and that. And when the Pakistanis, those days the West Pakistani politico-military oligarchy, in brutal disregard for the electoral mandate that we have for transfer of power from the west to the east, and a genocide was imposed on us, the resistance movement started the resistance movement that took shape in the Liberation War, which we won with the assistance and cooperation from India, is the mainstream narrative, in a general narrative. The same event, narrative for Pakistan, and those are being written and taught in their schools, colleges and universities, are totally different. The narrative of the same event that I'm trying to draw your attention to. That is, the people of East Pakistan had inherently been disloyal to the existence of a united Pakistan. They always conspired in collaboration with Indian ruling elite to dismantle Pakistan, and that's why they had to impose a war on that. And finally, there was a war between India and Pakistan, and Bangladesh was emerged. Bangladesh had emerged. So there is no history of exploitation exercised by political, economic, or cultural by the Pakistanis. No resistance movement here. No death of our freedom fighters. No genocide taking place. Is the Pakistani narrative. What is the Indian narrative? The Indian narrative is Pakistan was an artificial state created along religious line because of Jinnah and others' conspiracy. And then East Pakistanis, the Bengalis once realized that it is not going to have any future. So they had their struggle for self-determination, and eventually there was a war between India and Pakistan, and Bangladesh was created. Once again, in their main official history, the serious struggle for 23 years, millions of death and sufferings of a few more millions is absent. What is the politics here? Politics is, all of us know that on all issues on earth, India and Pakistan differ from each other. But while giving the narratives of Bangladesh war, they are on the same ground. Why? By providing the narratives in question, Pakistanis, particularly the 71 generation, can tell their people, that's called customization of history according to their own nationalist interests. They customize the narrative to make their children, next generation people, understand that they did not lost to a people whom they used to consider a non-martial race for years, for decades. They have lost the war in 1971 to a numerically superior forces. So they do not have, at least they can, what should I say, they can tell their people that they are not that incompetent enough to lose the war. They can lighten their burden. And why India do the same? They customize the narrative the same for a different thing. Since Bangladesh has done very little to liberate its country, they have done it. So that legitimizes their influence on Bangladesh, even the post-independence Bangladesh. And then we have our own narratives. That's not uniform enough. There are different political parties, there are different classes. They have their own historiography to paint the picture. And Bangladesh historiography is, again, not only classed, that is at times partisan, jingoistic, and patriarchal. Because each political party, the powers that be, those who are in power, have written their history of the same event, the way that can help them to perpetuate power. How history helps perpetuate power? Because particular kind of a narrative legitimizes or delegitimizes a particular class or parties in power. If a particular political party can show in history or convince the younger generation that nobody else but we have done everything, it politically legitimizes that particular political party to rule the country forever. So we have seen when a government changes, historiography of Bangladesh takes a U-turn. They say that it was primarily a military war, and there was no politics behind that. And another party says there was primarily the political war, and military was controlled by the governance that we had done. And interestingly, isolated research, memoirs of different organizers, political and military, shows 70 to 80% of the freedom fighters who fought for our country came from peasantry and urban poor classes. But most of the history written by different groups of intelligentsia having allegiance to mainstream political parties will show you, and every day in different newspapers will see that the urban guerrillas, urban educated middle class freedom fighters have liberated this country. What's the problem in giving these two kinds of, two opposing kinds of narratives? If the professionally written mainstream history admits that it was the ordinary people coming from the very poor socio-economic backgrounds actually successfully for this war, the question of legitimacy comes that so the ownership of this country primarily belongs to them. Then there can be no discrimination in terms of what we have from this morning heard, that accumulation of national capital in the hands of a few. Partnership, I mean the ownership of this country belongs to the poor people because they primarily fought the liberation war. Not only the liberation war, if you go, in fact, a little back, all the major movements, who were the casualties? Language movement, education movement in the 60s, mass uprising in 1969. You will find, if you check the list, 80 to 90% of those who died came from the poor classes of people. So how come that this country do not belong to the poor classes? The capital accumulation has been centered in the hands of a few. This is the importance of historiography. How you look at history, how you read it, how you perceive it, and how you use history. So just take 1 minute. The last thing that I want to tell you is, there is it's an Orwellian statement. Who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past. History has to be rescued and from the ruling classes of the people to actually materialize what we have already discussed here. We have seen, we have heard discussed that this country has the historic promises to have a state where equality, social justice, and human dignity will be there. If we cannot write history in the lives of really what had happened, that the people at large fought for this country primarily, you cannot have the promises of history resettled. At this point of 50 years of Bangladesh, I only hope, at least for the next 50 years, we'll be able to rewrite history. Thank you all.